Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei was the wielder of Ladon? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Issei sighed as he stood on the corner of the street waiting for his date to arrive. He couldn't believe that of all people it had been Kuroka that had talked him into going on this date. When the girl had asked him to go out with her, he had been of two minds, actually 100 as he and Erebor had been against him going out with her, while Gallifrey and some of the other heads had started screaming in his head that he shouldn't be so quick to judge. Especially to such a pretty girl such as her. He had asked her for a date to decide which at first seemed to displease her as she let a frown mar her face, but quickly let it disappear as another pretty smile took her face as she agreed. He had then went home and spent the day with Kuroka as they debated. She had finally convinced him to go on the date when she kissed him every time that he had tried to argue with her. So here he was standing on the corner of the street waiting to start a date that he wasn't even looking forward to as he would much rather spend the day with Kuroka. He was looking around for the girl who had said that her name was Yuma Amano. Apparently she was also another new student to Kuo Academy, and though she was in a different class than him, she had seen his fight with the perverted duo as they were dubbed by the rest of the school. As he stood there waiting, a woman in a black and white dress with a headband that had bat wings coming of the side of them walked over to him and handed him a paper, apparently advertising a new restaurant that had just opened up in town. As she was talking he heard Sariba telling him that she had the trace of a devil on her. When she finally walked away, Issei looked at the flyer that she had handed to him and saw a teleport symbol drawn onto it. Issei looked up to see where the woman had gone, but she was nowhere to be seen. Issei was about to discard of the paper, but the heads had said that they wanted to study it after he got back home. So instead he tucked it away into his shirt pocket when he finally saw Yuma running up to him. She started to apologize to him about being late, but he just waved her off, stating that he was fine with waiting as he needed time to think anyway. She had gained a thoughtful look when he had said that, but just put it behind her as she grabbed onto his arm and started to lead him through various different stores. Throughout the day they visited many different stores and Issei really started to enjoy himself as Yuma was witty and always kept things interesting. They had decided to eat in the park while they watched the children play. As they had eaten Issei had seen a longing look in Yuma's eyes while she watched them. He decided to ask her about it later. After they had finished they went back to the shopping district. While they were shopping Yuma had shown him a bracelet that she had really wanted, so Issei deciding to do something nice, bought it for her. She had smiled a beautiful smile and thanked him profusely. They had continued to shop until the sun had started to go down. Yuma had then asked him to go to the park with her, though when she did she wouldn't look at him, and whenever he caught a glimpse of her face, he saw that she was frowning, and a tear was just about to fall from his eye. Whenever he asked her what was wrong, she would just put on a fake smile and claim that everything was fine. When they had finally got to the park, Yuma had walked ahead of him and sat down on the side of the fountain. He heard her mumble, "Why does this have to be so hard? It was supposed to be a terrible date then I ended, but I can't." "What do you have to end?" asked Issei as Erebor and the other voices started to tell him to be on his guard. "Oh, Issei, I'm so sorry for this. I didn't have good intentions when I asked you out. I was supposed to see if you knew anything and then get rid of you, but I can't, I just can't," sobbed Yuma as Issei stood there unsure what to think. "I knew that I shouldn't have left something as important as this to you. Guess I'll take care of this myself." Issei heard something get released and heading toward him and dodged to the left as it flew by. He was momentarily surprised at the sight of a beam of light flashing by him. Issei then whipped around to see a man with a black fedora, grayish black hair, and gray eyes. The man was in a black overcoat and was holding another spear of light. Black angel wings were coming out of the man's back. "Ah, that's what I felt on her," said Erebor as Issei studied the man. "She's a fallen angel." Issei, now knowing what he up against, summoned the chains on his wrists, but leaving the ones on his back concealed. The arrival of the chains looked to have surprised both of the fallen angels. Issei, not wasting any time, whipped the chains at the man who dodged the attack and let off another light spear at him. This time, he used a spell that Sariba and the others had taught him and cast a spell that absorbs the force of an attack and is reflected back as long as the spell is a mid to low level one. His using magic seemed to have surprised the fallen angels even more as the man had stopped just long enough for Issei to wrap a chain around his leg and drag him down to the ground, where he then attempted to wrap his other chain around the man's torso. Alas, the man was too quick and moved before he could. They kept at this for a while until the man finally decided to try something completely different, so as he dodged Issei's right whip, he launched a blasting spell straight at Yuma, who had been completely unprepared as she had watched a fight with wide eyes, falling in love with a brown-haired boy as he proved his skill in combat. When Issei saw what was about to happen, felt his body automatically react, and he jumped in front of the spell, not listening to the heads of Ladon as they knew that he could get seriously injured. And lo and behold, the blast struck him right in his heart. He fell to the ground as he heard Yuma scream. He heard the man laughed and disappeared in a flash of black feathers. He felt Yuma kneel beside him and tried to use a low-level healing spell, but she wasn't able to heal the hole. As he lay there he thought about how his life had come to this. He hoped that Kuroka would be able to take care of herself and hoped that she wouldn't forcefully rip him out of the land of the dead just to kill him again. He thought about the voices, which were screaming equals trying to get his attention, and wondered who their next wielder would be. He thought about Sona and Tsubaki and wondered how they'd feel. He thought about Yuma, where would she go now since she refused to kill him. And right before his eyes closed for the last time, he thought about the red-headed girl in the window and how he would never get to introduce himself to her. He saw a flash, although it might have been the light at the end of the tunnel. The last thing he saw before he blacked out was a very buxom-figured red-headed girl and her claiming him as her pawn. The next morning Issei woke up with a massive headache. He also felt very comfortable, as not only did he have the familiar weight of Kuroka on his chest, but also something comfortable pressing into both of his sides. He then closed his eyes and was prepared to go back to bed when his eyes flew open and he looked at both sides seeing Yuma and, if the rumor mill at school was correct, the most popular girl in school, Ria's. He couldn't believe what he was seeing until he realized that they were all naked. At this his head fell back and he thought, only my life would lead to something as crazy this is, as all three girls snuggled closer to him. Issei laid there in the midst of the girls, talking to the heads of Ladon. What happened after I was hit? Issei asked as he felt like the heads were hiding something from him. Well, the good thing is that you didn't die, said Gareth cheerfully. Although after an idiotic stunt like that I'm surprised that you're not, said Erebor, although Issei could feel worry coming off of him. Oh, hush Erebor, said Sareba. He was trying to defend a pretty little lady. Although Issei, I am curious why you didn't just use the spell absorber to cancel it out. It's because, since he was hurt, he had to be cared for, which got him a spot in the middle of three hot naked chicks, said Gallifrey in what sounded like hero worship. About that, why am I naked, with three equally naked girls in my bed? Asked Issei. Oh, that's because when you were healed, the skin on the surface wasn't healed as to not raise suspicion, and being the nice beautiful girls that they are, they used a spell that worked best with full body contact, said Gallifrey, as if it was the best gift in the world. Erebor then started to turn on Gallifrey, so as Gallifrey and Erebor fought over what was most important that Issei should learn from his mistake, he started to talk with Sareba and Gareth. So I didn't die, is it because Ria's resurrected me? No, actually by the time Ria's completely transported through the seal, you were already healed completely, said Gareth. I was, how, and who did Ria's make into her new pawn? Issei asked confusedly. Oh, that was Raynor that was made into her pawn. Raynor is Yuma's real name, by the way. Raynor asked if she could become her pawn as she didn't want to leave you, but didn't want Don to seek or any of the other fallen angels that follow Cockabale following her trail and finding you. Ria's agreed, and Wallace, she is one of Ria's pawns, said Sareba. As for how you were healed, we'll leave that up to him or them, whichever to explain, said Gareth, and Sareba mentally backed away from him. Issei was confused until he realized that the mind that had never moved was coming closer to him. Hello there, said the voice in a very creepy way, as it wasn't just one voice but two. Hi, said Issei unsurely. Allow us to introduce ourselves, said the voices. I am God, said one of the voices, and I am Lucifer, said the other voice. The revelation surprised Issei, as he had two figures in his mind that wielded incredible power. Wait, you mean like from the Christian Bible? Asked Issei, and when they confirmed it, he continued, so you mean I, like, wield the power of God and the original Satan? No, said Lucifer. You see, you remember when the heads of Ladon told you about the fight in heaven when he supposedly died? Asked God. Well, what most people don't know is that I also supposedly died, but in all actuality me and him had gotten tired of all the constant fighting of our two factions and with the fallen angels, so we came up with a compromise. That's right, we decided to fake our deaths and go into hiding, said Lucifer. So when we were about to let off the last of our attacks, we both used a spell that expelled our consciousnesses from our physical bodies, as they let loose our most devastating of our attacks that left nothing of each other behind. From there we decided to implant our minds into a newborn's, you, and see the world from the point of view of a human, said God. What we weren't expecting was Ladon to also take up residence in your mind. After they had we agreed to not influence anything that you did and let you go throughout your life. Well, we did until you to a light spear to the heart, so me and the old guy decided to heal you, using up the rest of power that we had retained from the body switching, although there was some consequences, but other than that the only other thing that happened was we were rendered completely powerless. Oh. Well. Please call me John, I gave up my place as God long ago. Oh. Okay. Well, John, what was the consequences that he was talking about? Well, when we put all of our power into you, you were given the power of an angel as well as a devil. Oh well, wow, guess I wasn't expecting that one, said Issei. So are you going to teach me all that you know? Nope, said Lucifer, it will be a lot more interesting to just sit back and watch you as you go through life. Oh okay, well I guess I should get up and get ready for the day, said Issei. As Issei finished talking with Lucifer and John, he came back to his body as he felt Kuroka's tail traveling up his leg again as she usually did when they slept, right before she woke up. As usual when this happened, he just grabbed it and held it in his hand. He blushed as she then started rubbing her bare chest onto his and mewling quietly. His blushed even harder as Rhea swung her leg around him and pushed her privates onto his leg as she started to grind on him. His head almost burst when he felt Rainer start massaging close to his privates. He almost jumped out of his skin when he heard his mother open his bedroom door, stating that it was time to wake up. When she saw her son, naked, with 3 girls, also naked, and heard one of them start to moan, she screamed out for his dad as she rushed downstairs. He sighed as he felt the girls start to stir after his mother had slammed the door as she ran from the room. He watched as Kuroka sat up and rubbed her eyes and then at Rhea's, who was stretching while thrusting her chest out, straight towards his face. He then grew alarmed as he then looked between them, realizing that he had a high-class devil in the room with him and Kuroka. He then, forgetting about their nudity, dived onto Kuroka and rolled them off the bed. He then crouched over her as Rhea's finally looked their way, giving him a small smile as she saw what he'd done. Unfortunately for Issei, that was when his parents opened his door again and saw him, still naked, crouched over Kuroka, who was also still naked, while another naked girl sat watching them and another was just sitting up. At this point his father slammed his door shut and on the other side he could hear his father yelling out that his son was a man now. Issei blushed as he heard both Rhea's and Kuroka start to giggle. He then felt Kuroka sit up from under him and give him a kiss while pressing her breasts to his chest. She then laid back and smiled at him. It's fine Issei, me and Rhea settled our differences last night Naya. Although we did destroy most of the house before she finally decided to listen to what I had to say, don't worry, we repaired the damage and whipped your parents' mind of the incident. But anyways, after she heard my story she agreed that, while I had not taken the most appropriate course of action, that I was justified in what I did and decided to welcome me to her peerage as a pawn, which would put me under the protection of the House Gremory Naya. Though I haven't given her my answer yet, as I am your servant already and didn't want to do something that would upset my precious master Naya. She said while rubbing his thigh, making him go even redder. Though she did tell me some amazing news, my precious little sister is her rook Naya, so even if you won't allow me to join her peerage, I will still be able to see her from now on ya. I hope she doesn't hate me for what I've done though. She finished somberly. Issei smiled down at her and leaned down and gave her a gentle kiss, to which she reciprocated. If it makes you happy then, you may join her peerage. He said, used to her jokes about him being her master, at least he hoped that she was joking. He then realized a position that they were in and blushed again as he shoot off of her. He then sat on the bed as Rhea's and Rainer leaned into him on either side and asked if they would get a good morning kiss as well. So after blushing once again and haltingly kissing them both until he got a nod from Kuroka, he got up and got dressed as the girls started to pick their clothes up off of the floor. He then made his way downstairs with them following closely behind him. When he made it to the kitchen, he saw his dad with shit-eating smile on his face while his mother jerkily made breakfast. When he sat down his mother started to speak. Now Issei, I know that I gave you permission to have a harem. At this his head jerked to the girls and gave them a questioning look. Rhea's only blushed and smiled while mouthing later to him, but I thought that we had agreed that you would stay abstinent until your wedding day. His mother said while filling his plate. After a very painfully long day of hearing his mother chide him and his father unable to say anything as he just couldn't stop smiling, he and the girls, with Kuroka in her full cat form, walked to school. As they walked, Issei turned to look at Rhea's, who was looking ahead with a big grin on her face. Why did my mom say that she gave me her blessing on having a harem? He asked Rhea's, who didn't stop smiling, but did let a blush appear on her cheeks, said cheerfully, well, I may or may not have planted that thought in your parents' mind when I whipped them at the fight. She said while finding the grass on her left side very interesting, especially the fact that he was on her right. He only shook his head and mumbled to himself, only with my life. As Issei and the girls continued to walk, he delved back into his mind to talk to the newest residents. Hello? John, Lucifer, where are you guys at? What you want, kid? Lucifer asked as the presents appeared. Well, your answers earlier left me with some more questions that I hoped that you would answer. And those would be? Asked John. Well, first of all, why do you two share the same presence? You two fell like the exact same mind and you two can't go in a different direction than the other. Well, that's because when we cast the mind-removing spell on ourselves at the exact same time, the spell forced our minds to merge. I'll personally think it's fate punishing me for my sins, said Lucifer. No, it was a blessing as it has helped us to settle our differences, said John. You say that, but you're not the one who had to give up their mental stash of pornography, Lucifer said sadly. Issei could tell that this was a sore point before the two of them and decided to try and take their mind off of it. Earlier when you said that I have both angel and devil properties, what did you mean? He asked, hoping that they would focus on the question and not the pornography. Well, exactly as we said, Lucifer, still moping, you can now use both devil and angel magic, as well as you can now fly. Right now, you have 2 sets of wings, but as you get more powerful, you will be able to summon more. Also, if you can get your devil powers high enough, you could start your own peerage. He said, as he gradually stopped moping. Also, if you have an angel fall in love with you, they won't fall if they try and pursue a relationship with you, said John, happy that if any of his children fall for Issei, they would be able to love him without worrying. As they had been talking, Riaz had started a conversation with him. So, now that Kuroka and Rainer are part of my peerage, I am going to get them a place in Kuo, she said. Issei remembered their earlier conversation when Riaz had asked him if he had remembered what had happened at the park. Issei had told Riaz that he just remembered a guy with wings and holding what looked like a spear made of light, not wanting to tell Riaz about Ladon just yet. Riaz had then told him about the factions and some of the more interesting facts about some of the families in the underworld. Issei shook his head and returned his attention to Riaz. Issei nodded and then asked, Rainer should be fine, but what about Kuroka, wouldn't Sona attack her like you did? Well, said Riaz, that's why she is currently in her cat form. She is going to stay like that until I can talk to Sona. She'll listen to me, even if with something like this, she said, thoughtfully. So if we get Sona's cooperation, then integrating them into school will be 10 times easier? Asked Issei. Precisely, said Riaz, sounding as if she thought it was the best plan ever made. Issei nodded as they walked through the entrance of the school. As they walked, everyone that saw them stopped and stared. This had happened yesterday as well, when he came into school after fighting with the pervs. When he had gotten there, everyone had stopped and cheered for him. The girls' sports teams had rushed him and started to praise him, with some even declaring their eternal love for him. He had not liked the attention one bit and had escaped the first chance that was presented. He had then met up with Sona and talked with her for a while before he was called to the principal's office. When he had gotten there, he had just told him to try and not to get in any more fights, but that he was not in trouble as he was only acting in self-defense. Issei had thanked him and then went back to class, where a bandaged Mitsuda sat in front of him, sending him hateful looks every now and then. This starring was completely different. This starring had jealousy in the eyes of everyone that saw him, Riaz and Rainer, as Kuroka was hiding in his book bag. All the guys that he passed looked him with utter loathing as they saw Riaz brush up against him. The girls all looked at Riaz as if she was the worst thing that had ever happened to appear on the earth. Issei didn't like the starring any more than yesterday, so he grabbed Riaz and Rainer's hands and pulled them into the main school building. When they had shut the main doors, Issei had let out a sigh of relief. Hello, Issei, Riaz, and I'm sorry, but I don't know your name, came from behind them. Issei turned to see Sona and Tsubaki standing there. Issei smiled and greeted them. Issei then saw something that surprised him as Tsubaki was looking at his and Ria's interlaced hands with narrowed eyes. He caught her eyes when she looked up and gave her a questioning look. She then blushed deeply and ducked her head. Issei then looked towards Riaz and Sona, who were whispering to each other before Sona motioned her head to the side and they started to follow after her. She led them to a room that had a sign labeled Student Council over the doorframe. When they entered, all eyes were upon them. Sona then introduced him to the Student Council, her peerage. Riaz must have told her what had happened. She pointed to Tsubaki. This is Tsubaki, as you know, she is my queen. Tsubaki gave a little bow when she was introduced. She then pointed at a blonde-haired woman and a brunette. These two are my bishops, Momo Hanakai and Ryakusaka. They too gave a small bow when they were introduced. She then pointed at a sleepy-looking blue-haired girl, an oink-haired one, and said, my knights, Benya and Tomo Meguri. This time only Tomo bowed, and Benya only looked at him as he was an interesting puzzle. Sona then pointed at another blue-haired girl. This is Tsubasa, one of my rooks. Loop is currently in college, he's my other rook. She then pointed at smug-looking brown-haired guy and a brown-haired girl, and finally my pawns, Genshiro Saji and Raruko Nomura. Raruko bowed, while Saji walked over to him and thrust out his hand for Issei to shake. What's up, I'm Saji, of course I know who you are, Issei Hyoudou. It would be good for you to be on good terms with me, as I am so powerful that it took 4 pawn pieces to resurrect me, he said in a smug tone. You know, the last person who acted so smug towards me got their nose busted. I really hope this isn't the real you, and I mean so smug about yourself, as people like that really piss me off. Issei said in a bored tone as he finally relented and shook Saji's hand. Saji grew wide eyes when Issei had said that before. He smiled and in a more friendly tone he agreed. They then spent the next hour talking about what had happened, and Riaz had asked for Sona's help. Sona had grown thoughtful and then smirked and agreed to help as long as she and Tsubaki were promised a place in Issei's now official harem. Issei had blushed and was about to deny that he had a harem when Riaz readily agreed and said that she could have a high position in the harem. After that agreement, Riaz called Kuroka out of her hiding place. When she had appeared, everyone stilled before Saji tried to attack. In the blink of an eye, both of Saji's hands were bound by chains, and Issei had 14 chains appearing from his back that were weaving amongst each other like a group of snakes. Everyone grew wide eyes when they saw this and backed away from Issei except for Kuroka as he brought Saji closer to him. "If you ever try to attack her again, I'll make you regret it for the rest of your life." "Got it?" he said menacingly as Saji stared at him with wide eyes. Saji furiously nodded his head as Issei let him go. After this little display, Sona turned to Riaz with a look that demanded an explanation. Riaz then told Sona about what had transpired at the park and what had happened after. They then turned to Issei and gave him the same look until he relented and told them about Ladon. Riaz had been a little mad when she found out that Issei had just let her go on about something that he already knew until he smoothed her feathers by telling her that he just liked the sound of her voice. After that, she had just blushed and thanked him for the compliment. It took a while, but Sona finally agreed to get Rainer and Kuroka a place in the school when Riaz promised that if she did, she would get a kiss from Issei. She blushingly agreed and Issei fulfilled Riaz's promise. Tsubaki had then, blushing like a cherry, asked for one as well. He only smiled at her and gave her a kiss. The bell then rung for them to go to class. Rainer and Kuroka stayed in the student council room as the others all went to class. When Issei walked into class, he was bombarded by looks of hatred and adoration. The guys all looked as if planning his funeral, as the girls all looked as if planning their wedding. Issei looked around the class and saw that a few desks were empty. He shrugged and walked over to his desk. When he got there, he saw a tack on his chair and saw both Motohama and Mitsuda both shaking their shoulders as they quietly laughed. He picked it up and sat it on Mitsuda's desk and then sat down. Mitsuda stopped laughing when he had and turned and glared at him for ruining his plan. Issei only rolled his eyes at him and then focused his attention on the teacher as he came into the room and started class with an announcement. Apparently 3 of the students in their class had been selected to a foreign exchange program and wouldn't be back until next year. When asked, a teacher had said that they would not have the new students in their class as they were going to be in a class that doesn't have as many students, as they had sent 4 students, but their school was only receiving 4. After class and another attempt at Mitsuda trying to instigate Issei, he made his way back to the student council room. When he got there, he was tackled by an affectionate Rainer. After he was able to extract himself from her breasts, he welcomed the others as they arrived. After they had confirmed that Rainer's and Kuroka's forms had been turned into the principal's office, Issei followed Riaz as she led him and the others to the old school building. Where Riaz led them to the old student council room which she and her peerage had set aside for their occult research club. When they entered, with Kuroka again in her cat form hiding in his pack, they were again the center of attention. Riaz then introduced Issei to her peerage. She pointed to a blonde-haired guy who was, as Issei remembered, was dubbed the Prince of Kuo Academy, Hyoudou Kiba, her knight. She then pointed to a white-haired girl who had a very similar devil signature to Kuroka's. Riaz dubbed her as Kaneko Taoju, her rook, who was sniffing the air and looking at Issei with narrowed eyes, as if trying to figure out something that was on the tip of her tongue. Then Issei saw a wet girl walk out of a room close by. She had long black hair that was tied into a ponytail and a chest almost if not bigger than Riaz. She was only covered in a towel, and she was looking around in interest at the new arrivals. Riaz then introduced Issei to Akeno Himejima, her queen. Riaz then turned to her peerage and introduced him to Rainer, her new pawn, and Issei, her new boyfriend, wielder of Ladon, the lost Longinus. Issei blushed at his introduction, but then asked Riaz to introduce her other new pawn. Riaz then grew serious and then asked her peerage to not do anything drastic. She then called out for Kuroka, who appeared in the middle of the room after hopping through his bag. When she had, everyone had gone quiet until, big sister. The whole room turned to Kaneko, who was looking at Kuroka with what looked like astonishment. Her eyes started to water, and right as she looked like she was about to cry, she launched off of the couch. But instead of embracing her, as everyone sans Issei expected, she actually swung at Kuroka instead. Kuroka, having kept up her practice while staying with Issei, easily dodged the swing, though she didn't attack back. Everyone stared as the 2 sisters fought, with Kuroka only dodging each blow. Finally, after what seemed like hours, but actually wasn't more than about 20 minutes, Kaneko collapsed to her knees and cried. No one moved, as they didn't know how she would react to being comforted at the moment. Finally, Issei, not able to hold himself back from comforting the girl, stepped up and crouched beside her. He didn't say anything to her as he just held her and rubbed her back as she cried into his shirt. Issei then motioned for Kuroka to take her other side, which she did. The 2 of them then spent the next 10 minutes holding her as the rest of the room's occupants left for the hallway. Finally, Kaneko stopped crying and just started sniffling into Issei's shirt. Issei finally broke the silence when he asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" She nodded her head. Well, if you do, then you are going to have to come out of my shirt so we can talk. He gently told her as he started to pull her back. When he saw that her face was still tear-stained, he reached out and wiped her face with his sleeve. At this point Kuroka decided to try and start a conversation with Kaneko. My precious little sister, I've missed you so much, Naya. She said while pulling her clothes and hugging her while sobbing. Issei almost chuckled that Kuroka was still able to put Naya into her speech while crying. Issei then started to stand, deciding to give them time to spend with each other, but as he started to stand, two hands reached out and dragged him back. He saw that one was the hand of Kuroka, while the other was the hand of the surprisingly strong Kaneko. He smiled at them and sat back down beside them and listened to them as they caught up and reminisced until Kaneko got to the point that they were all dreading. Would you do it? What do you mean? Oh, that. Well. Here Kuroka gave him a pleading look, begging him to help. He only shook his head slightly and motioned for her to answer her sister. She stuck her tongue out at him and then went back to answering the question. Well, I had overheard Tsugi, their last master. I made up the name as I don't know if he was actually given a name. Planning to defile you, Naya. He said that you had lived in his house long enough without paying the price that the rest of us were forced into paying and that it was your time to be bedded, Naya. I couldn't allow that as you were still so young and had so much to live for without that creep scarring you for life, Naya. So I did the only thing that I could think of at the time. I attacked him, Naya. The Inkami, Tsugi's queen, made that up too, were caught unaware, Naya. I was able to kill her easily with a spell to the heart, but Tsugi was able to dodge my attack and strike back, Naya. I was able to get the upper hand on him, though, through total strength. He may have been our king, but he was a weak king, Naya. After that, I realized what I had done and my only thought was getting you to safety, Naya. Said Kuroka in a pleading tone, practically begging for her sister to understand. There were better ways to do it. Said Kaneko. I know, I made a huge mistake, one that I should never had made, but it was all to protect you, Naya. Kuroka said near tears. Issei saw that Kaneko was about to say something that she might regret later, so he decided that he should put his 2 cents in and see where that lead. What she says is true. Kaneko looked to him. She did it all for you. True, she did make a big mistake, one that almost cost her life, but it was all to protect family. She could have taken countless other, more reasonable paths, but instead she took the path that has led us here. Do you regret what has happened to you after she killed the bastard? I mean, life looks pretty good from your end from what I see. A new kinder master, friends that will protect you to the last breath, and all the chips in the world that you can eat. Kaneko blushed at the last point as she saw him glancing over to the mound of empty chip bags beside the sofa. This all wouldn't have been possible without her mistake. Sure, that doesn't make it right, but at least it led to a better life for the both of you. Kaneko nodded, deciding that she was a lot happier where she was. It would probably be a while until she could look up to her sister the same way that she used to. She then started to talk to her sister again, though, during the rest of the conversation, Kaneko was inching closer and closer to Issei, practically in his lap. They then came to a point in the conversation that again caused some discomfort. So how far along are you in your Senjutsu training? After all this time you're probably close to mastering it, right, Naya? Kaneko looked down at her knees and responded, I gave up Senjutsu after you killed Tsugi. I was scared that I was going to go crazy, like everyone said that you did, and hurt someone that I care for. She said sadly. Oh, well then we have to get you started on your training right away. Now let's see, what am I going to need first, Naya? Kuroka said thoughtfully. I don't know if I want to continue with my training, Kaneko said meekly, making Kuroka's eyes widen comically. I'm still scared of what might happen. Nothing will happen ya. And yet it might. Issei saw a fight about to break out again and again decided to run damage control. How about this, he said, getting both of their attentions. You will continue to train in Senjutsu and I will watch you, and if you get out of control, I will stop you. Though if I do this, then you will have to watch me as I get stronger to make sure that I don't get out of control. Issei said, making Kaneko look curious. It's not bad that you fear your power, in fact it's good, as that means that you will not abuse it. It is good that you fear gaining power, as that means that you are afraid of the responsibility that comes with it. It is only the strongest of us all that are willing to fear power and still wield it, be it to protect yourself or those that you care for. I am always afraid of the power that I wield, as I fear that one day, the power will tempt someone to attack me and cause me to end a life. Even with over 100 teachers constantly guiding and leading me, there still lies the chance that I will fall under the temptation. So that is why I am willing to watch and help you, but only if you promise to do the same for me. Issei said while Kaneko watched him with wide eyes. So do we have an agreement? She only nodded and he smiled at her. He then turned to Kuroka, who tackled him with a hug, lavishing him with thanks and very lecherous promises for his kindness. Outside in the hallway, Rias and her peerage, minus Kaneko, were standing and giving each other questioning looks. So what do you make of Kaneko's suddenly made known emotions? asked Kiba. Even though he knew Kaneko's story, he was tired of the silence. How would you act if your supposed older sister, who is considered one of the biggest criminals in the underworld, all of a sudden appears after so many years? Asked Akeno. Good point, said Kiba. After a minute they heard a thud and some loud talking. They hurried into the room and saw something that they weren't expecting. Issei was underneath of Kuroka, who was smothering him with her breasts while yelling out all the different ways that she was going to pleasure him. They had walked into a point where she was talking about the different studded collars that he could make her wear while he rode her. Akeno blushed and placed her hands on her cheeks. Kiba blushed and backed away slowly from the overly affectionate Nekoshou, which apparently is what Kuroka and Kaneko are, not just Nekomata. Rias was starting to plan how she could make it into a threesome. Finally, deciding that she had seen enough, Kaneko stood, grabbed Kuroka by her kimono, and threw her onto the couch behind herself. The room's occupants looked on in confusion until the blushing Kaneko walked back over to Issei and sat in his lap while stating, "My Issei." Issei blushed, while Gallifrey, who had been complaining about Kuroka being taken away, started to cheer again, along with Lucifer. Gallifrey and John mentally blushed as Gallifrey wasn't very affectionate and John viewed it as one of his children in his lap. Sariba chuckled while teasing Erebor, who was giving off a slight uncomfortable vibe as he didn't do well with affection. The other heads of Ladon were busy trying to find a way to incorporate Senjutsu into Issei's already impressive arsenal. They figured that they could add that in, then there was less of a chance of Issei encountering an opponent that he couldn't handle. Finally, after everything had settled, everyone took seats in the room, Issei with a curled up Kaneko in his lap and a pouting Kuroka beside him, as they all looked to him as they realized that he hadn't introduced himself to them yet. Once they had finally completed introductions, they started on the questions that each of them had for him. First up was Ria's. "Issei, I'm wondering, how did you survive the light spear through the heart?" she asked with her head tilted. Issei just answered, "I have an immunity to light attacks for the most part." And when further questioned, continued, "I have angelic qualities in me, though I am not an angel." This confused them, and they were all thinking on what to continue with until Kiba asked a question, "So does that mean that you are weaker to demonic powers?" "Actually no, as I am also part devil. I am also pretty adept with demonic powers in truth." At this they all stared at him with shock and awe until Akeno stated, "Prove it." Issei gained a thoughtful look and pushed his shoulder blades out while focusing his magic in that place. As Sariba with a great ripping sound, Issei stood there shirtless while 3 pairs of wings appeared from his back. The first and biggest were a pair of emerald dragon wings that spanned about 15 feet from tip to tip. The second pair and second largest were a pair of devil wings ranging from tip to tip at about 10 feet. The third and smallest pair, spanning 8 feet in length, tip to tip, were a pair of angel wings. All of the occupants in the room stared at him for a moment, including Kuroka, who was leaning onto Rainer to see the whole expansion of the wings. Finally, breaking the tension a little, Akeno looked at his wings, then down to his chiseled chest, blushed, leaned over to Ria's, and stated in a loud whisper that they could all hear, "What were you saying that high harem requirements were again?" Issei woke from his pile of girls. They had started to sneak into his room and his bed when Kuroka and Kaneko had reunited 3 weeks ago. It had started with Kaneko and Kuroka fighting for the space on his chest when he had fallen asleep. When he had woken in the morning, it seemed that they had come to an agreement as Kaneko was on his upper chest while Kuroka was on his stomach. He had looked to his left side and saw Rainer pressed against him with a smile on her face. Issei wondered what Rainer was doing there as she was supposed to be with Rias, as Rias had offered her a room at her house. Issei then looked to the right and got the answer to his question as Rias was pressed against him with a smile on her face as well. He realized that while the rest of them were clothed, she was stark naked. He resolved to ask her about it later as he felt Kaneko starting to wake. When she realized that he was watching her, she blushed but nuzzled her head in the crook of his neck while stating, "My Issei." The next day that he awoke, everyone was back where they were the day before, except for this time Issei felt that he was on a different mattress. He turned his head to see Akeno laying beneath of him, with his head laid in the valley of her breasts. He wondered if she could even be comfortable under all 3 of them, but remembered that she was a devil and had more strength than a human would. He looked to see Rias naked once again, as she had said that she couldn't sleep without being naked, but he really wondered if she was trying to tease him with her body. Issei turned his head back to the girls on his chest as he felt Kaneko waking first again. This time when Kaneko caught him watching her, she blushed and this time kissed him briefly, causing him to blush as well as she again stated, "My Issei." This morning when Issei awoke, he realized that he was in a softer bed than normal, even softer than Akeno's breast. He was again pinned down by the 2 girls that were on his chest, but this time he was completely shocked as instead of Rainer and Rias, there was instead Sona and Tsubaki. He knew that Rias had offered them a part in his harem, but he thought it was only a joke. He then looked up and saw that there was a canopy above his bed. When did that get there? He asked himself. Last night while you were sleeping, Riaz and Sona changed your bed, your room, and your house," said Gareth, as he was the most awake of the heads at the time. "My house? Yep, as you slept last night, they each brought in all of their family's workers and turned your meager 2-story house, with 3 bedrooms and 1 bath, to a huge mansion that has 15 rooms, with yours being the biggest, as they decided to make sure that they were able to accommodate any other harem members that may join. They also built in 13 bathrooms, the largest again attached to your room. The bathroom is more like a great hall, and your bathtub is like an Olympic pool. Oh, by the way, I should tell you that your 2 neighbors that would always scream at each other over your lawn are now gone, as the girls bought their houses and sent them across the country. They tore down their houses and built a huge garden to the left of your house, and to the left, they built a large training area. Your room and bathroom take up the whole top floor of the house, which is the 5th," said Gareth, mentally listing things off in his mind, while Issei sat there unable to believe what he was hearing. They did all of that in one night. Yep, it's surprising how quickly devils can work, especially with 2 of the highest up devils managing you. You know what, I'm not surprised anymore. I figured that they were going to do something like this one day. I just wish they would have asked me before they did. What about my parents? They are going to have the shock of a lifetime when they awake. Well, actually, they coincidentally forgot that they ever had a smaller house. Of course they did. Issei said with resignation clear in his voice. His attention was then brought away from Gareth as Kaneko, the early riser of the group, sat up and arched her back while holding herself up on all fours. Issei had realized that as time went on, Kaneko got more affectionate while also letting more of her Nekashu nature show. Issei had realized that Kaneko refused to sit anywhere but in his lap if he was in the immediate area. Of course, Kuroka didn't always allow Kaneko to have Issei's lap, as she would jump into his lap if he sat anywhere close to her. It had caused the most brutal of glaring contests whenever she did. Some of the other girls would also take occasional places in his lap, especially Akeno, who would giggle every time that Kaneko and Kuroka would glare at her for it. She had claimed that it was like an affair that the 2 couldn't do anything about it. Anyway, as Kaneko stopped stretching, she leaned down as was her morning ritual and gave Issei a kiss that he had started responding to after the 3rd day. When she ran out of oxygen, she sat up and crawled to the end of Issei's eyesight, and then he heard he stand and go to the left. He heard a door shut and guessed that was the bathroom. The sound of the door shutting seemed to wake the other girls as they all started to rise and stretch. Issei sat up and cracked his back before looking at Riaz, who had been laying behind Tsubaki, and gave her a look that demanded to know why his bedroom was twice the size of his old house. She only blushed and pretended that she hadn't seen anything. He sighed as she got up and quickly walked to the bathroom. He then got ready for the day, as Riaz and Sona were still pretending that they didn't see anything different about the house. Issei was glad that it was not the weekend, as on weekends Erebor would drag him out of bed, metaphorically, and force him to train. After he had started to train with his girls, he started having them show him how to use his demonic powers easier, as well as having Kuroka and Kaneko start to teach him Senjutsu, which had surprised them to learn that he was able to use it. Erebor had also convinced John and Lucifer to start training Issei in their own special powers that they had developed over their long lives. All in all, weekends were worse than weekdays for Issei. After everyone was ready, it was like a mass exodus from his house as he and the girls left for school. He was finally able to get the 2 king devils to admit what they had done and have them promise not to do something like this again until they had his permission. They finally reached the school with everyone staring at him in either hate, jealousy, or love. He was able to ignore their looks now, as he had plenty of practice over the past few weeks. Issei arrived to his class with Kuroka and Rainer, who had both used magic to make themselves look like second years. The first day that they had arrived in class, they had been swarmed by the guys in the class, declaring their eternal love for the girls. Kuroka and Rainer had taken great pleasure in breaking their spirits when they both grabbed onto Issei and asked for him to protect them from the pervs. But Suda and Motohama had both felt themselves boiling with anger until Issei gave them a look that said that any shit pulled by the 2 of them would leave them in pain in the end. When he sat down, he felt Mitsuda glaring at him from the corner of his eye and just smiled at him in a carefree way. After that, class got underway and Issei dove into his studies. After school had ended, he walked back to the Orc with Kuroka and Rainer. After he got there, he learned that Sona and Riaz had meetings in the underworld and they were required to take their peerages with them. He told them that it was fine and he would wait for them to come back. They then left in a flash of magic after all his girls had kissed him goodbye. After they had left, Issei had decided to go to the park. He didn't have any other plans and he knew that if he went home, Erebor would want Issei to try out the new training area. So as he went through the park, humming, he thought about how his life had come to the point that it was. He was in the middle of wondering if he was cursed or blessed with the sacred gear when he heard someone trip. He looked over and saw a girl around his age in nun clothing on the ground with her suitcase opened and her belongings spilled out. He walked over to her as she was starting to stand and offered her a hand. After he helped her to stand again, he reached down and started to pick up her belongings and put them into her suitcase for her as she started to brush herself off. After he had gotten everything, he handed the suitcase to her and decided to start a conversation. He reached out his hand and with a smile said, "Hi, my name is Issei Hyoudou, what might be your name?" She smiled back at him as she shook his hand and responded, "Hello, my name is Asia Argento." She said in perfect Japanese, which surprised him a little as she didn't look Japanese at all. He mentally shrugged as he felt the heads of Ladon giving him the meager information that they had on her as they had apparently heard of the Holy Maiden. Apparently she had a sacred gear that could heal any injury. He then walked with Asia, "So what brings you to Japan?" "I've been relocated to a church here as they say that it is understaffed." Issei could tell that wasn't the complete truth but decided to let it pass. "You must mean the old church up the hill. Weird as I thought that it had became abandoned after the one in the next town over opened up. Well, no matter, even if it was abandoned, it is still a house of God and deserves to at least have one nun to look after it." Issei just nodded in agreement as John told him more about Asia. Apparently she had the sacred gear, Twilight Healing, and apparently after his death, the gear started to evolve and gave itself the ability to heal anyone, including devils and fallen angels. After they had spent about an hour in the park with Asia, he showed her where the church was before going back to his house. He was doing the 1,000 sit-ups that Erebor had assigned when a note had appeared in his lap. It was from Riaz, it read, "Dear beloved Issei, we will not be back tonight as the meeting has ran over and we are being made to stay in order to resolve the issue. I hate to ask this of you, but I have 2 contracts planned tonight, but none of us will be able to make it. Can you please take care of them for me? The first will be at 4:30 in the evening and the other will be at 11 at night. If you could please take care of these for me, I would be most thankful and would prove it in any way that you desired." Issei let out a sigh, so much for his day off. But in order to help Riaz he was willing to do as she asked. He got up and got ready to go back out through the complaints of Erebor about bothersome devils, which got Lucifer mad, sparking an argument between the two of them. Issei looked at the clock and saw that it was 4:05 and that the address was a 10-minute walk from where he lived. He tucked the paper into his shirt pocket and got to stepping. He arrived at a small apartment complex. He looked at the note which said that his client was in room 144C. He asked a clerk at the front and found that it was on the 3rd floor, so he started walking up the stairs as Erebor would never allow him to take the elevator unless it was an emergency. When he got to the door, he knocked and a man answered inside for him to enter. When he walked in, he saw what looked like a bachelor pad. There was trash everywhere and movies and magazines littered the floor. While Issei looked around, a man with black hair and blonde bangs walked into the room from a door to the left. When he saw Issei he looked a little confused, but Issei wasn't paying attention due to both John and Lucifer jumping to the forefront of his mind when they saw the man. "Careful Issei, this man could be very dangerous to you," said Lucifer as he watched a man from Issei's mind. "What is the leader of the fallen angels doing, making contracts with the devils?" he thought. "Leader?" thought Issei back, now on his complete guard, though not showing it. "Yep, that's Azazel, governor of the fallen angels," answered back John, while he too wondered what Azazel wanted with the devils. Issei, deciding to break the ice, again looked around, stating nice place. This seemed to ease some of the awkwardness as Azazel smiled and asked, "So you the devil I asked for, you don't have the breasts that I was hoping for, nor the gender." Issei blinked surprised by this man's bluntness. He then shook his head and said, "Well, I'm sorry for disappointing you, but I'm all that was available at the moment. So what do you need?" "Well, I want someone to hang out with and it appears that you have the wit and humor to keep me entertained, so you should do fine." He then looked at the clock and then back at Issei, "So what you good at?" Over the 4 hours Issei and Azazel spent time playing video games, were dominated in all trivia games that they played, while Azazel was the better racer. Talking about anything that interested them, and Azazel trying and failing to get Issei to drink and watch porn, to which Issei responded, "I've once been tricked into drinking Gallifrey and don't wish to try it again. And if I wanted to see naked women, I already have many girls willing to fulfill that request." Azazel looked at him with shock before throwing back his head and laughing loudly, "A man after me own heart," he gasped out in an Irish accent. After that they spent the day in peace, with Issei starting to actually like Azazel, as he was cool, though he was most likely bipolar, as his mood would change as quickly as Issei could blink. When it was time for Issei to leave, he had Azazel promising to make all of his appointments with him. Issei saw that it was only 8:30 and decided to go eat as all Azazel had in his apartment was snack food and had left him hungry. After he had finished eating, it was 9:30, so he decided to walk to his next appointment. He had 3 minutes until he was supposed to arrive and knocked on the door but got no answer. He knocked again with the same result. Finally he decided to just open the door and see if anyone was home. When he opened the door, he was assaulted with a very strong smell, the smell of blood. He rushed to the place that it seemed to be coming from and saw something that even upset Lucifer with how cruel the sight was. A man was nailed to a wall, spread eagle, with multiple slashes upon his body. It was in all random non-vital places that would hurt him, but not kill. What made it worse was as he walked into the room, the man started to look up at him. The cruel man that had done this couldn't even give the man enough sympathy to end his life. He was about to check on the man when a knife flew through the air and pierced his throat. Issei whirled around to see a man in black priest robes with a crazy look standing behind him. Looks like I've lured a little fly into my stinky bloody web. End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.